In the world of aviation, few stories are this ironic. Qantas, the airline that helped design one of Boeing's greatest aircraft, never bought a single one. They spent years shaping its range, its cockpit, even its safety systems. And then, when the jet finally took off and conquered the skies, Qantas walked away. Why would an airline help create the Boeing 770 only to refuse to fly it? The answer isn't just about airplanes. It's about geography, strategy, and survival from the edge of the world. The story starts in the early 1990s. Boeing was still the king of the skies, but the crown was slipping. Oil prices were rising. For engine giants like the 747 were bleeding money. Meanwhile, Airbus was surging ahead with sleek new designs. The A330 and A340. Boeing needed a miracle. A brand new jet that was powerful but efficient, long range but affordable, and built for a new era of global travel. Boeing did something no one had ever done before. It invited airlines to help design the plane themselves. They called it the Working Together Initiative. And Qantas, Australia's flying kangaroo, was one of the key voices at that table. Qantas wasn't just another airline. It was a long-haul survivalist built in isolation, surrounded by ocean. Flying from Australia wasn't a luxury. It was endurance. Every aircraft had to cross thousands of kilometers of nothing. So when Boeing asked for input, Qantas pushed for extremes. They wanted range that could cross the Pacific, reliability over empty ocean, and comfort for passengers trapped in the air for 15 hours. The result? A masterpiece, the Boeing 777. It was the first jet designed entirely on computer. It burned less fuel, flew farther than any twin-engine aircraft before it, and became an instant legend. And yet, when the world lined up to buy it, Qantas didn't. While United British Airways and Cathay Pacific rushed to order dozens, Qantas stayed silent. No orders, no deliveries, nothing. Everyone was baffled. This was their plane, the one they helped shape. So why ignore it? Simple. The early 777s, even the 777-200ER, didn't have the range Qantas needed. They could fly far, but not far enough. Sydney to Los Angeles, Melbourne to London. Those weren't just long routes. They were lifelines. Qantas stuck with its four-engine Boeing 747s. Old, yes, expensive, definitely. But they could make the trip every time. And when Airbus unveiled the gigantic A380, Qantas saw opportunity, not excess. Fewer flights, more passengers, longer range. It fit their geography perfectly. Most airlines chase trends. Qantas chases precision. Running an airline from Australia is like operating on hard mode every spare part. Every pilot, every delay costs double. So Qantas keeps things simple. Fewer aircraft types, deeper investments in each one. The 777, too similar to the 747 to justify replacing it. Too different from the A332, fit in easy and not quite powerful enough to fly Qantas. Toughest routes. So while the rest of the world made the 777 their workhorse, Qantas waited patiently, strategically. Most airlines chase trends. Qantas chases precision. Running an airline from Australia is like operating on hard mode every spare part. Every pilot, every delay costs double. So Qantas keeps things simple. Fewer aircraft types, deeper investments in each one. The 777, too similar to the 747 to justify replacing it. Too different from the A332, fit in easy and not quite powerful enough to fly Qantas. Toughest routes. So while the rest of the world made the 777 their workhorse, Qantas waited patiently, strategically. Now, Qantas is chasing something even bigger, the ultimate aviation marathon, Project Sunrise. Non-stop flights from Sydney to London, Paris, and New York, over 19 hours in the air. To do that, they needed an aircraft with impossible range and unmatched comfort. Boeing pitched the 777X, but the program was delayed, over budget, and still UNCERTIFIED. Airbus came ready. They offered the A350 to 1,000 proven, reliable, and customizable. They even worked with Qantas to modify it specifically for these record-breaking routes. And when decision day came, Qantas didn't hesitate. They chose Airbus. The Boeing 777 changed global aviation. It reshaped airline economics, crushed the four-engine era, and became one of the most successful jets ever built. But not for Qantas, because Qantas doesn't follow the crowd, it follows logic, geography, and patience. The airline built a fleet around what Australia needs, not what the world wants. The A384 scale, the 787 for precision, and soon the A354, the longest flights ever attempted. Meanwhile, the 777 remains the ghost of what could have been the plane Qantas helped build, but never flew. In the world of aviation, there are stories of innovation, risk, and triumph. And then there's this one. The story of how Qantas, Australia's national airline, helped Boeing design one of the most successful jets in history, only to walk away from it completely. They've spent years shaping its design, its range, its very DNA, and then refused to buy even a single one. It sounds absurd. Why would any airline help create a jet that would go on to dominate global fleets only to never fly it themselves? The answer reveals not just a business decision, but the kind of strategy that can only come from an airline, literally flying from the edge of the world. The story begins in the early 1990s. Boeing, still the king of commercial aviation, was facing turbulence. Oil prices were climbing, profit margins shrinking, and a new rival, Airbus, was rising fast with fresh, efficient designs like the A330 and A340. Boeing needed something bold, something revolutionary. The 747 was aging. The 767 couldn't keep up, and airlines were demanding more range, more comfort, and less fuel burn. Boeing needed a new jet, one that could carry hundreds of passengers across oceans with just 2 engines. And so, Boeing tried something it had never done before. It opened its doors. Instead of developing a secret project behind closed hangar doors, Boeing invited the world's biggest airlines to help design its next aircraft. They called it the Working Together program, a radical idea for its time. Engineers, pilots, and executives from across the world sat in Boeing's boardrooms, shaping what would become the next generation of flight. Among those voices was Qantas, the airline from the farthest edge of the map, whose entire existence depended on crossing massive distances with precision and reliability. For Qantas, flying wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. Every flight from Australia meant hours over empty ocean. No diversions, no alternate airports, no second chances. They needed a plane that could handle extreme range, brutal utilization, and the most remote routes on the planet. And so, when Boeing asked what they needed, Qantas pushed for the impossible: more range, more durability, and more redundancy than anything before it. The result was the Boeing 777, a jet unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was the first aircraft fully designed using computers, built with new materials, new systems, and a digital fly-by-wire control system that replaced mechanical cables with pure software precision. It could carry over 300 passengers, burn less fuel, and fly farther than any twin-engine jet before it. Airlines were amazed. When the 777 rolled out of the factory and into the skies, it was clear Boeing had built a masterpiece. And then came the shock. As orders poured in from United British Airways, Cathay Pacific, and Japan Airlines, Qantas stayed silent. The airline that had helped shape the 777 never ordered one. Not a single plane at first. It didn't make sense. This was the perfect aircraft for the modern era. Cheaper to run, easier to maintain, and capable of long-haul routes that once required 4 engines. But for Qantas, it wasn't perfect. The early 777s simply didn't have the range to do what Qantas needed them to do. They could cross the Pacific, yes, but not with the reliability and payload Qantas demanded. Sydney to Los Angeles, Melbourne to London, Brisbane to Dallas. These weren't just routes. They were lifelines connecting a continent to the rest of the world. So, while other airlines rushed toward twin-engine efficiency, Qantas doubled down on what worked. The Boeing 747-400, the queen of the skies, could handle those extreme distances with 4 powerful engines and unmatched range. It wasn't fuel efficient, but it was safe, proven, and capable of bridging Australia's massive isolation. And when Airbus unveiled the A380, the largest passenger jet ever built, Qantas saw more than just size. They saw strategy. For most airlines, the A380 was a risk. too big, too heavy, too costly. But for Qantas, it was perfect. Australia's population was limited, its routes were long, and its airports were few. Why fly multiple small planes when you could send one super jumbo and carry everyone? For Qantas, it was about maximizing every mile. The A380 wasn't a gamble, it was a statement. It became the flagship of their fleet, a flying symbol of endurance, comfort, and national pride. Behind the scenes, Qantas' choices weren't emotional, they were surgical. Running an airline from Australia means every mistake costs more. Every spare part is farther away, and every maintenance delay hurts harder. That's why Qantas has one of the most disciplined fleet strategies in aviation. Fewer aircraft types, maximum efficiency. Every new jet must justify its existence across training, maintenance, and logistics. Adding the 777, a whole new type, with unique systems and pilot requirements, would have disrupted that balance without offering enough upside. It wasn't a snub to Boeing. It was a calculated move to protect the airline's operational simplicity. While the rest of the world made the 777 their backbone, Qantas waited for something even better in the vast skies of global aviation. Few mysteries are as puzzling and as dramatic as the story of Qantas and the Boeing. 7. This isn't just a tale of an airline skipping out on a best-selling jet. No, it's the story of an airline that helped create one of Boeing's greatest engineering triumphs, only to walk away. Imagine helping to design a car. Every knob, every screw, every inch, and then just as it rolls off the production line to worldwide acclaim, you decide never to drive it. Qantas, the proud flying kangaroo of Australia, has long been known for its bold decisions, ultra-long routes, and meticulous fleet planning. But while airlines across continents snapped up Boeing 77s by the dozen, Qantas stood on the sidelines. Not one order, not one delivery. This snub raises the obvious question. Why? Why did the airline help midwife the birth of the world's most successful twin-engine widebody only to leave it off its fleet entirely? Strap in. Because this is not just about aircraft. It's about geography, strategy, survival, and a vision so unique that it defied global trends and rewrote what it means to fly from the bottom of the world. The story of the Boeing 77 begins not in a lab, but in a boardroom, a place where urgency collided with vision. It was the early 1990s, and Boeing was losing altitude. While still the undisputed leader of commercial aviation, the winds were changing. Airlines were no longer satisfied with clunky, inefficient foreign aircraft. Oil prices were climbing. Margins were shrinking, and global traffic patterns were shifting. Airbus was surging with bold new designs like the A330 and A340, and Boeing's existing offerings, particularly the 747 and 767, were showing their age. The world needed a new kind of airplane, something powerful but nimble, efficient but long-range, technologically advanced but customer-friendly, and Boeing knew it couldn't do it alone. In a move that stunned the industry, Boeing launched the Working Together initiative in Aviation First. Instead of designing a new aircraft in secrecy and rolling it out for potential buyers to accept or reject, Boeing opened its doors to its biggest customers. Not metaphorically, literally. Engineers, pilots, executives, and maintenance chiefs from the world's leading airlines were invited to sit at the table. It wasn't just collaboration, it was co-authorship. This was the most intimate partnership ever attempted in aerospace. Among the chosen voices shaping the project was Qantas, Australia's national airline, a carrier known not just for flying long, difficult routes, but for pioneering them. To understand Qantas' inclusion is to understand its legacy. A brand synonymous with endurance, safety, and aviation ambition. Australia's tyranny of distance meant that Qantas had always required more from its planes. More range, more resilience, more trust. And so, at Boeing's table, Qantas pushed for innovation. Range that could survive the Pacific, durability for high-utilization long-haul cabin design that catered to weary globetrotters, and safety systems that could handle thousands of kilometers with no land in sight. The aircraft that emerged from these sessions wasn't just a plane, it was a feat of modern engineering. A 300-plus passenger twin-engine jet that would redefine the long-haul game. Its digital fly-by-wire system replaced clunky mechanical cables. Its fuselage was designed entirely on CAD software. It promised better fuel burn, fewer emissions, and new routes no one had dared try before. The 777 wasn't built by Boeing alone. It was built by a council of the world's most demanding airlines, and Qantas had helped raise it. Which is why the industry was stunned when the aircraft began shipping and Qantas didn't buy a single one. When the first Boeing 77 rolled off the assembly line and took to the skies, the world watched in awe. Here was a twin-engine aircraft that could fly farther, safer, and cheaper than its quad-engine rivals. Airlines that had once sworn by the 747 began pivoting to the sleeker, more economical 777. The numbers spoke for themselves. Better fuel economy, lower maintenance costs, and the flexibility to serve everything from regional hubs to flagship international routes. The 777 was a gamaker, and the airlines knew it. One after another, the very carriers that helped design the aircraft signed on. United Airlines became a launch customer, turning the 777 into its Pacific Fleet workhorse. British Airways began deploying it on transatlantic routes, calling it a business traveler's dream. Cathay Pacific, Japan Airlines, and ANA praised their perfect mix of capacity and fuel savings, allowing them to open new long-haul routes into Europe and North America. Even American Airlines and Delta, once cautious about massive fleet overhauls, placed large orders and began shifting away from older models. The 777 was fulfilling its destiny. Except for one airline, the one that had helped create it. There was no announcement, no statement, just silence. The airline that had helped shape the very bones of the aircraft, the cockpit ergonomics, the fuel load configuration, the structural redundancies for long overwater routes, stood still while its peers moved forward. Aviation analysts were baffled. Journalists wrote OPEDs, some speculated about diplomatic tensions. Others suspected pricing disagreements, but none of that truly explained it because Qantas wasn't hesitating. It was a choice. It was choosing not to fly the aircraft it had helped bring into the world. And that choice said more about Qantas than it did about Boeing. For Qantas, every decision starts with geography. In Australia, beautiful and wild as it is, sits on the edge of the world. For most airlines, long haul is a luxury. For Qantas, it's survival. To operate from Australia is to be a prisoner of distance, surrounded by vast oceans and thousands of kilometers from the world's major hubs. Qantas has always faced logistical problems most airlines never even have to consider. There are no quick repositioning hops, no shortcuts, no second chances. When you take off from Sydney bound for London, you're in it for the long haul, literally and metaphorically. In the 1990s, as the 777 was entering service, Qantas was navigating this reality with clinical precision. It studied the early variants of the 777 and saw a simple problem: range. The original 7200 and even the 7200ER couldn't meet the airline's most essential requirement: reliably flying the kind of ultra-long-haul missions that defined Qantas' brand. Sydney to Los Angeles, Melbourne to London, Brisbane to Dallas. These were not vanity routes. They were lifelines. The Boeing 747-400, for all its age and fuel burn, could still do what the 777 could not: carry full loads of passengers and cargo across the Pacific with room to spare. It had 4 engines, giving pilots more confidence when flying over the vast, isolated southern oceans. And when Airbus unveiled the A380, Qantas saw an opportunity. The A380 wasn't just big, it was massive. For a country with a limited population and long distances, fewer flights with higher capacity made far more sense than multiple flights with smaller jets. So, while the rest of the world was embracing twin-engine long-haul efficiency, Qantas was pursuing something else entirely: scale and range. The airline didn't need flexibility. It needed force. It needed aircraft that could leap oceans and carry national expectations with them. The 777 simply didn't cut. It wasn't a bad plane. It just wasn't the right plane. Not for Qantas, not for Australia. And so the airline watched from the sidelines as the jet it helped build became the backbone of fleets around the world. It stayed loyal to its 747s, invested in the A380, and quietly walked away from the aircraft that bore its fingerprints. But the story didn't end there, because the sky was changing again, and Boeing was about to make a new offer. One with a longer range, a new engine, and a very familiar name: As the Boeing 77 program soared, Qantas was plotting a different trajectory, one rooted not in what was trending, but in what was tried, tested, and trusted. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Qantas had cemented its reputation as a long-haul specialist. Its Boeing 747 fleet wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol. The 747-400 South carried Australia's ambitions across oceans, connecting Sydney and Melbourne to London, Los Angeles, Johannesburg, and Hong Kong with unparalleled confidence. Therefore, engines, generous range, and significant passenger and cargo capacity, they became Qantas' lifeline to the world. In a nation defined by remoteness, the 747 was both a necessity and a badge of pride. But aviation, like technology, never stops evolving. Airbus was preparing to shake the industry once again. In 2005, the European manufacturer delivered its vision of the future, the A380, a double-decker marvel, larger than anything that had ever taken flight. Its promise was clear: more people, fewer flights, better economies of scale. It was the super jumbo jet for super long routes, a machine that could turn Sydney to Los Angeles or Melbourne to London into single-leg high-density, high-prestige showpieces. Most airlines paused. The A380's size made it a logistical headache. It required airport modifications, stronger runways, new boarding bridges, and specialized ground equipment. Many carriers feared they would never fill it. Others didn't see the point in introducing a four-engine aircraft just as the industry was swinging toward to engine efficiency, but Qantas didn't flinch. For Qantas, the A380 was less a gamble and more a mirror. It reflected everything the airline valued: range, capacity, endurance, and brand image. Qantas wasn't operating out of Frankfurt or Chicago. His flights weren't two-hour hops. Its passengers didn't want frequency.